Have you ever had a time in your life when things had just begun to feel pretty settled, secure, safe, solid, that maybe you had arrived at some kind of plateau where you could just relax and put things on cruise control for a while, and then all of a sudden something happens that just rips the rug out from underneath your feet, and you're forced to re-examine all that you thought had been finally set in stone. Has that ever happened to you? It has to me. It is very disorienting. There is a poem by a poet that I like a lot. Her name is Kate Light. Her poem is about this very thing. It's entitled, "There Comes the Strangest Moment." Here are just a few verses. Listen closely. She says, "There comes the strangest moment in your life when everything you thought before breaks free. What you relied upon as ground rule and right looks upside down from how it used to be. You question every tenet you'd set down. Obedient thoughts have turned to infidels. How many people thought you'd never change? But here you have. It's beautiful. It's strange." And that's how life is. Just when your life starts to feel familiar, like an old, soft, comfy slipper, there comes the strangest moment. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. That will shake the very foundations of your life. And without warning, you will be called to change, to grow, to reconceive. It's like that old Chinese proverb that goes, "The trees wanted to stand still, but the wind kept blowing." Life is like that. It does not stand still. If anything in this world is constant, it's change, this call to growth. This call to growth. It's strange, it's disorienting, it's beautiful, and it never ends. In fact, researchers tell us that in the course of every 7 years of your life, every cell in your body changes, like a complete turnover, like a reconception, so to speak. Every cell in your body, every 7 years. What this means is the person you were 7 years ago, think about where you were, what you were doing then, is literally not the same as who you are today. Our minds change, our hearts change, our belief systems change, our politics can change, and we can become new people. Martin Luther King Jr. liked to quote an old black preacher who liked to say, "We ain't what we ought to be, and we ain't what we want to be, and we ain't what we gonna be, but thank God we ain't what we used to be." Thank goodness this is how life is. We grow and we outgrow. We outgrow. The great John Claypool once wrote, quote, "Life is successive stages of dying to smaller worlds that we might be born into larger worlds." Let me say that again. Life is successive stages of dying to smaller worlds so that we might be born into larger worlds. If that doesn't make sense to you, think of it this way. Every one of us starts off as 2 tiny cells in our mother's womb. But we can survive in that space only for 38 to 40 weeks, and then we have to move on because we've outgrown the womb. To stay would be to die. At that point, labor begins, hard labor begins. Now, from the mother and father's point of view, this is wonderful. This is the day they've been waiting for, one of life's great new beginnings. But from the infant's point of view, this is a catastrophe. It feels like the end of the world, to be rudely torn from mama's warm, soft, comfy womb where food was on demand, thrust into the bright lights, into the arms of masked strangers who stick you with needles and poke you and prod you. You scream, you cry, you curl up in a fetal position, you do anything to go back from where you came, but you can't. Because this is the only way you can come to life, by dying to one small world and being reborn into a larger world. It's strange, it's surprising, it's scary, it's mysterious, it's wondrous, But at the same time, it is beautiful, the gift of this new life. And here's the deal. From this point on, that's the way it's going to be. They're going to take you home all swaddled up and put you in a little crib. And then you will outgrow the crib, and they will put you in a cradle. And then you're going to outgrow that cradle, and before you know it, they're dropping you off at preschool. Don't drop me off at preschool. And by the time you get used to that, by the time you know where all the crayons are and where they keep the snacks, then it's time to go to kindergarten. And when you finally get used to that and you're through with the world of sandboxes and finger paints, you are born into the world of first grade with textbooks and chalkboards, and then third grade, and then sixth grade, and 11th grade, and so on, all through life until you reach the end of your life. And guess what? This, too, is a passage from a small world into a much larger world, life beyond the grave. What do we call it? Heaven. But don't be afraid. It may be scary. It's certainly unknown. It's certainly strange, but the promise is that it will be beautiful. This is the way God has intended it. Life is successive stages of dying to smaller worlds so that we can be born into larger worlds. This is why we're not born just once, but we are born again and again and again. And this is why, listen to me, this is why we must never try to shrink ourselves back into places that we have already outgrown. Why am I saying all this? Because I think this is what was happening to Nicodemus. This is what woke him up in the middle of the night. It was the call to growth, the call to change. Remember, Nicodemus was a Pharisee, a ruler, an elite member of the religious establishment. He was quite at home with the status quo. It was set in stone, this power structure that he was a part of, this belief system that worked certainly quite well for him. But then enter Jesus of Nazareth, who was this radical young rabbi with his revolutionary message and his disturbing activity. He was the guy that turned over all the furniture in the temple. It was his revolutionary association with outcasts and untouchables. This rocked Nicodemus' world. You better believe it. It shook the foundations of his belief system. It challenged all his assumptions. He wanted to stand still, but the wind kept blowing. There came the strangest moment for Nicodemus, when everything he thought before had been challenged, and his most obedient thoughts turned to infidels, and he was floundering in unfamiliar terrain. This is kind of stuff that wakes me up at 2 a.m. in the morning. It woke Nicodemus up. He was unable to sleep, and he knew that if he was going to see Jesus and question Jesus about all of this, he'd better do it in the middle of the night when none of Jesus' enemies would notice him. Well, now Jesus could see immediately what was happening for Nicodemus, this call to growth, the labor pains, the hard labor already beginning, Nicodemus dying to a smaller world view, his birth into a larger world. Jesus put his finger right on the pulse when he said, "You must be born anew." But Nicodemus, still using his old operating system, said, "What?" He was a literalist, you see. "You mean crawl back into my mother's womb?" "No," Jesus said. And thus he introduced Nicodemus into a whole new way of thinking about life, the difference between the earthly and the heavenly, the flesh and the spirit, the physical and the metaphysical, the first birth and the second birth. The first birth happens when you and I are born to our flesh and blood mothers and fathers here on earth, our earthly parents. But the second birth happens when we are born into the eternal Spirit of God, our heavenly parent. You must be born anew unless you want to live your whole life a flat earth, materialist existence. You must be born into the Spirit. But the more accurate translation of the Greek here is not born anew, but born from above. That's the more accurate translation. You know, most of us live our whole lives being born from below. Flat earth, one-dimensional, eating, sleeping, working, earning, spending, buying, 9 to 5, and then you die, and nothing more. That's being born from below. But to be born from above is to enter into a whole new realm of something more, a realm of transcendent reality, a realm of new possibilities, a realm of unseen eternal things of the Spirit. This is the larger life that cannot die. This is the true life into which we are all called to be born again and again and again. It's strange, yes, but don't be afraid, because you will see how beautiful it is. Well, now, what about Nicodemus? What happened to him after he went home that night, after his visit with Jesus? Read on in John. 5 chapters later, you will see Nicodemus, this time not under the safe cover of darkness, but in broad daylight, defending Jesus to the rest of the Pharisees who were out to destroy Jesus. And then again, at the very end, after the crucifixion, Nicodemus is the one who went with Joseph of Arimathea to carry the body of Jesus for burial. And with him, he carried 100 pounds of myrrh and aloes and spices. That sounds foreign to us, but that's what they buried kings with. He brought 100 pounds of those spices to prepare the body of Jesus. Is this the same man? Or has something changed? There comes this strangest moment, sometimes in the middle of the night, when everything you thought before breaks free. How many people thought you'd never change? But here you have. How strange. No, how beautiful. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. We have a hymn about this in our hymn.